Sky-high prices have forced many businesses and hardworking Americans into bankruptcy. The latest numbers show inflation was much higher in January than economists had predicted. And joining us this morning to discuss, Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Good morning to you, sir. January's consumer price index really a lot higher than what was really anticipated at 3.1%. So what implications will this have, and what does this mean for the average person?
Yeah, it means inflation isn't going away. You know, despite what you've heard from this president and some other observers, while inflation has been on a positive trajectory, it has lowered, it's still not going away. It's a lot more stubborn than we anticipated. So that means we have a less likely chance that the Fed will cut rates in the near future, something that I really think that needs to happen, especially at a time when borrowing costs are so high and people are really getting left behind in this economy.
Meantime, America's top banker and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, says that this is the most predictable crisis in history. In fact, the headline in Forbes magazine says that Americans are going to start losing their homes, their spending power, and national security. That's what this is going to cost us. Talk about the challenges you see ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. I've been at this for decades now, trying to get Congress to recognize you need to get the federal budget under control. And the problem is it just keeps getting worse, and there's no willpower amongst members of Congress to do something about this. And now we're in a situation where just making the interest payments on our national debt is going to exceed the entire cost of the Defense Department. Now, this is just staggering to think about. We are spending ourselves into bankruptcy right now. Everybody knows that it's happening, yet Congress doesn't seem willing to cut even a single penny. That means huge implications for programs like Social Security, which is facing a depleted budget in coming years. The trust fund is running out of money, which means we're going to either be facing massive tax increases or benefit cuts to our senior citizens. That's not fair. Congress needs to act immediately.
It is so frightening. You were talking about, the government spending us into bankruptcy. Americans also spending themselves into bankruptcy as well. Credit card debt has reached an alarming level right now at $1 trillion. Obviously the most concerning because it carries the highest interest rates and leads to that debt spiral. But when it comes to how the feds could lower interest rates, how would they do that at this point, Brandon, without inflation getting more out of hand?
Yeah, and the numbers that you mentioned are really staggering once again. You're looking at $17.5 trillion in consumer debt, over $1.1 trillion of credit card debt, which, as you mentioned, very dangerous type of of debt to hold because it can result in that debt spiral where people can't afford to make monthly payments, fall behind. Default rates are up on credit cards. Default rates are up on auto loans. So we're in a really tough spot. So I would like to see the Fed cut interest rates. Unfortunately, yes, that does mean that inflation could stick around longer than anticipated. It's a reason why, as I've said for a long time, Congress and the president need to help out. The Fed has had to do all of the work here when it comes to reducing inflation, and they use a very blunt instrument when they cut when they raise interest rates, I should say. Of course, that does help inflation, but it drives up borrowing costs. It's made it more difficult to afford a home. We see housing prices increasing significantly, and it makes it more difficult to finance those day-to-day expenditures, which is why we're seeing this explosion of consumer debt.
Bar none, the government, as you said, number one, needs to cut spending first, but also get better trade policies and less regulatory overreach. Talk about the importance of these factors to lower the U.S. debt and really get a handle on this inflation.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet when it comes to handling inflation, but getting our finances under control should be first and foremost. And then other things like more sensible trade policy. We should be able to trade with our allies, our friendly countries like Canada, Europe, Australia, Korea. You know, we saw when we had this baby formula crisis recently, there was plenty of affordable, safe baby formula in Europe, but we couldn't get it here because we had these ridiculous trade restrictions. We need to take a fine-tooth comb to these, get rid of these restrictions, lower tariffs with friendly countries so that prices for our consumers and our manufacturing sector are much, much lower. And of course, cut that red tape, which has made it so difficult to operate a small business in a tough economy.
Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Great to see you as always. Hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jim.